You. Hi, everyone. Again, I am Dalena Nguyen. I have been an educator for, oh no, math, 13 years now. I think I'm going into year 14. I started my career off in the Mississippi Delta with Teach for America. Then I moved to Hartford on a whim. My family is very confused still. They're all in California. And I've been in Connecticut for the last 11, 12 years now. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm going to share the PowerPoint with you, just in case you want to follow along or you want to keep it for your records. If you are willing and you don't mind, I'd love it if you, turn your camera on, but if not, that's totally okay too. So I'm actually going to get started because there's a lot I really want to do today. My goal is to, really talk about creating authentic opportunities for informal writing practice. I was a high school teacher, and I've been a high school teacher for over a decade, and so a lot of this is geared towards high school. However, the practice is transferable and can be used across K through 12. You would just have to level it a little bit lower and create, very purposeful prompts for younger students. And so this is the general agenda for today. We're going to go through, what's the problem, right, with like what are the barriers in trying to create practices for students to write? What does the science and research say? What are some instructional strategies and practices? And I would like to actually for us to participate in some of that practice too. And then questions at the end. A lot of the resources that I'm going to give you, a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about, you already do and you know how to do. I found myself, by the time I was my 5th or 6th year of teaching, there were a lot of good practices that I had done when I started teaching. And as I spent more time in the classroom, I kind of forgot about them, or I stopped doing them as regularly. And so if you're finding that, hey, that's a strategy I already know how to do, my goal isn't to like tell you about new strategies so much as remind us that these are in our toolbox. And we know that these are things that are good for students. And so really putting them back into our teacher repertoire, going into the fall. And so we teachers are tasked with helping kids build both disciplinary and writing skills. But most social studies teachers, their courses are not state tested, unless you have an AP class or you're in New York and you have the Regents. And so because we're not state tested, I'm not advocating that we should be, because we're not state tested, there's not a lot of resources that go funnel into giving our kids extra time and practice. When I say resources, it's not just, money, it's actually time. Time is our most valuable resource. And we don't get a lot of that outside of the classroom. And so how do we create time for authentic writing practice and feedback for kids? I've been an instructional coach now for about 5 years. So I was at first a teacher and a coach, and then now I'm solely a coach. And when I was visiting teachers, when I was in the classroom, and then when I was out of the classroom, writing happened at different points of the class and in different ways. Sometimes there'd be a small writing practice as I do now. There might be some graphic organizers or guiding questions for a reading in the middle of class. And at the end of class, there was an exit ticket, usually a paragraph or something that answered a question. And teachers might say, well, we're going to work on claims today. But what I was seeing in the classroom is by the time the kids got to the exit ticket, they hadn't really got a lot of practice in claims writing. They had got a lot of content, but did they have authentic practice and feedback to build that claim or argumentation skill? Graphic organizers are great. I love them. I use them a lot. I use them all the time, but they're not actually practicing a writing skill so much. They're actually used usually in service of building writing skill later on, right? Kids read a document, they put in their graphic organizer, they use that content to write later on. And I would like to say that I think the practice happens too late. I think we need to start building that practice into our lessons as we are giving, direct instruction, mini lessons, giving kids time to practice discrete writing skills throughout the class. And a lot of you have seen this, it's the reading rope, right? We know that in order to build strong reading skills, we have to work on also discrete skills, such as background knowledge, vocabulary, language structure. All of that stuff are the individual strings that are woven together to build really strong readers. That same rope exists for writing. If you haven't read it yet, the writing rope is a really great resource. I will tell you that its audience is more middle school, 4th to 8th grade. But I think that the general ideas are still the same, right? In order to build really strong writers, we have to work on discrete forms, discrete skills, word choice, concision, editing, right? All of that is the building blocks into creating strong writers. And so social studies teachers can build discrete practice informally throughout a class. All right, I'm going to put my teacher hat on for a moment. When I am teaching or giving, a mini lesson or maybe a do now, I will only talk for about the age of the student. So let's say if I teach high school and I teach sophomores, and so most of them are 14, 15 years old, I will probably only talk for about 10 to 15 minutes before I pause and do some type of check for understanding. That's my general rule. 1 year is 1 minute. So if you're teaching younger kids, 8 or 9 year olds, you really have only their attention. You only have their attention about 5 to 8 minutes. And so I've been talking at you now for 11 minutes. And if I were in the classroom, this is when I would pause to insert a writing practice. This is called the art of the sentence. It is a really low risk way to get kids to think about the 2 or 3 or 4 slides they've just learned about and apply it to a certain writing skill. So if my writing skill or aim for the day was about writing arguments, right, writing claims, I would pause here and ask a question for kids to really think about, okay, what have I learned and can I put it in a really concise sentence? Because down the line, right, these are basically claims that kids are writing. It's in one sentence, it's a beautiful sentence, but it's basically a claim. I think the art of the sentence is a really great instructional strategy to get kids to, 1, not freak out or feel overwhelmed about writing, and 2, for teachers to get formative data at the beginning of class so that teachers know where kids are throughout the phases of the lesson. And so take 2 minutes in the chat if you could write one beautiful sentence answering the following question. Why should we incorporate informal writing practice throughout instruction? Let's do, it's 3:13 now. If you could please enter your response in one sentence in the chat by 3:15. Thanks, Stacia, for being the first. Just a time check, it's 3:14. Thank you, Christina. I know we're recording right now, so I also want to show these responses on camera if that's possible. So these are the different responses we got. I think they're all on point, right? And the purpose, once again, is to get kids to say, hey, I've just learned 2 to 3 new pieces of content. How do I pause, take a step back, and check the data of my classroom? Where are they? What's the temperature check? All of these, then, you're all great writers, right? You are the teachers. At this moment, I would probably give whole class feedback, right? I would look at, hey, here are the trends. Here are your really, really strong. All of you have really defensible claims in that You are putting something on paper that can be argued against and for, right? You're succinct, your word choices are great. And I might then give you a piece of feedback that is a grow. This is not true for this group, right? You guys actually have really strong sentences, but I might say, hey class, here's what I'm seeing. I would like you to be more specific in your sentences. Try to use some of the content that you just learned in the previous slides and make sure it's incorporated in your sentence. So the art of the sentence is just one strategy that I would use to really put that informal, low risk feedback in for kids. It should take 2 to 3 minutes, right? 2 minutes to write or 1 minute to write, 1 or 2 minutes for feedback. I would love for us to try ourselves. I want you to think about your first units. If you're out of the classroom right now, just think about maybe a first unit, for one of your teachers, or maybe a first unit that you used to have. What is a prompt that you can create that students can answer for art of the sentence? The question should be open. It should encapsulate multiple points of content. It's efficient. Kids need to be able to answer it in 1 to 2 minutes. Low floor, high ceiling. Low floor, the question is accessible to as many kids as possible. High ceiling, it is open enough and rigorous enough so even your best writers can find some challenge in it. It is 317. I'm actually going to leave a sample up here in the yellow box is the checklist for a art of the sentence prompt. What is one question prompt that you could use for art of the sentence based on one of your first units for the year? It's 317. Let's come back at 320. Any questions before we start? Great. Just a time check. It's 3:19, but 1 more minute left. Great. Kareth, if you don't mind, can you tell us more about your prompt? And am I saying that right, Kareth?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, because I'm in my car.
No problem.
So basically, I have ninth graders. This is the first unit is enlightenment, and so I take not only the district testing to see where the writing skills are, but this is my first writing prompt just to kind of look to see what they can do. And so when you're looking at the Enlightenment philosophers like Caesar Beccaria and Rousseau, I just ask them then just to tell me which one they agree with and why. So then because I have the middle of the classes of high and low, it allows me to immediately see students who can only give me one or two questions or two sentences, I meant to say, and or a paragraph long, because then when you ask why, you can see if they can use that information to support their answer.
Yeah, absolutely, Kareth. And I actually have a strategy at the end of this that you could use that kind of gets that same idea. Thank you so much. I dropped my own why were colonists angry at the British government at the onset of the American Revolution. I tell kids one sentence because I don't want them to get stuck on grammar, on structure, because those are things that I could get feedback on later on. At the formative parts of the class, what I'm really interested in is what to make thinking visible. I want to see what kids can create, regardless of punctuation. So, when I do the art of the sentence, sometimes I get really run-on sentences. That's okay. The idea, right, is I want to know what kids are thinking at that moment in time. I want to collect data, just like Kareth was saying. And I want to make it so that writing isn't so scary. It's low risk, right? That's why it's just one sentence. You could also have it be public. For example, give me one moment. Oh, there we go. You could have it on a Padlet, right? And get kids to write it publicly to share with the class and get feedback. You can write it on whiteboards. I've done it on whiteboards before, or transparency. But the idea is getting kids to write really early on in class. There we go. So when do I do this? With any writing activity, no matter how small or large it is, you're going to have to, take the time to plan it, but it also takes time to execute. So it's really important to choose high leverage moments to insert this practice. And that's why you have to really think about what's the purpose of your practice that day. Is it evidence? Is it claims? Is it reasoning? Is it contextualization? Right? What's the disciplinary writing skill that you're going to focus on? Because that's going to also help you decide where to put your practice and how your practice should be structured. If you're looking for a quick check for understandings, right, that might be the art of the sentence. It's really 1 or 2 minute practices. If you're looking for a synthesis, it might be an art of the sentence prompt that might be a little bit more complex. We can still answer it in one question, but the idea is the leveling of the prompt will be a little bit different. And then, of course, if you're practicing feedback, right, and building writing through feedback, your practice will look different. And we can't forget about feedback. If given effectively, feedback is an opportunity for reflection and growth for both teachers and students. You as a teacher are giving feedback so that you are collecting data, but you're also thinking to yourself, what's the next lesson I need to plan? For students, it's internalizing their writing skills. It's also internalizing, what good writing is. What is argumentation? And so it needs to come, I think, really every part of class. You're doing it through circulation, through more formal feedback structures. You could also do it by narrating, right, what you see. Thanks, Jen, for making sure that you're restating the prompt in your question or in your sentence. That's public feedback that everyone who's writing is going to hear while you narrate publicly. I want to show you a quick feedback instructional strategy that I use called chart the error. The purpose is whole class feedback. Takes about 6 to 10 minutes, depending on the length of the samples you use. So if I'm doing a do now, I would use the one that you see on your screen now. It's quick. If I'm doing a much more formal writing lesson, where about holistic writing, I might use a paragraph. I've done writing workshops where I actually have given kids 2 essays to look at. And so the length of your sample is going to really depend on, again, your purpose and the placement of where it is in the lesson. I give kids a specific look for. So in this prompt, student A scored a blank on claim. I put blank there because every school I think is different in their rubrics. Why is student A's claim stronger? I'm not hiding the ball. Student A's claim is stronger, right? My point isn't to get kids to guess. I'm telling you, A is stronger. Tell me why. And a really important note that the samples that you use or create, if you can't find a student sample, the quality of writing should not obscure the skill. I chose these two prompts. They're actually two old prompts, two old samples for my class. Sample A, student A is not the most beautiful writer. The language is kind of clunky, doing, so they can do industrialization in Europe. It's not concise, but that's not the feedback I'm trying to give. So take a moment, looking at these two samples. Why is student A stronger than student B? It is 326. Let's do a quick 1 to 2 sentence explanation by 229, so about 2 minutes. Thanks, Christine. Sorry, Christina. About 1 more minute. All right, let's get started. Christina, if you don't mind coming off mute, can you say a little bit more about your explanation?
Okay, I said because they wanted, they stated the why. So I think that just shows like a little bit more of why the person understand it, the person could understand, what was the real motivation, not just like on the surface level, they wanted natural resources or they wanted rubber, but why did they want to use it? So that kind of connects back to the text where they would have had to look and see the purpose.
Absolutely. I also, you say why, right? I think I use a different language for claims, but I would use the word defensible. So we look at student B. The primary motivations for imperialism in Africa were economic because rubber is a natural resource. I think that's a fact, right? Rubber is a natural resource. I actually can't argue against that. And so when I'm giving feedback, right, the skill that I want to highlight for kids is claims writing. And the transferable piece of feedback that I want kids to understand and stamp, like my stamp it moment or takeaway, is claims need to be defensible. You have to be able to argue against it, or else it's just a fact. And at this phase in the lesson, there are 2 things I can do. Stamp it, move on, if I'm looking for quick practice and quick feedback. If I have the time, I would ask students to revise. Hey, take student B's sample, revise it, make it defensible, and then we would move on. But the idea is it's a very narrow skill. It's a very narrow piece of feedback. And the idea is my exit ticket at the end of class will probably be about claims. And so this practice, towards the middle or the beginning of class, is just building on to that final skill of claims writing. I'm going to pause here. Any questions? Okay. Another strategy in terms of helping students with informal writing practice actually might not involve writing at all. So not all writing practice will require writing. Sometimes it's actually about talking about the writing in a really critical way and thinking about the writing, thinking about argumentation as a skill. Forced choice and ranking activities really help students focus on narrowing to one skill and then grounding their conversations in the argumentation. They are practicing argumentation, right, as they are talking about writing. Because they're arguing, hey, I think this evidence is stronger. I think this evidence is stronger. In these practices, we want to provide as much for students as possible so that they could get to work on the talking parts. And so I provide a claim for students in this case. Enslaved populations in Latin America practiced syncretic religions in order to hide their native beliefs from Spanish and Portuguese conquerors. This would be a practice during my colonization unit. And all of these evidence would have been pieces of evidence that kids had seen in their reading throughout this unit. And so I've given kids a really clear claim. I've tried to make the language really clear and simple so that all students will be able to access it. I might, differentiate by defining syncretic religions for some students. And then I give kids 3 really clear pieces of evidence, A, B, and C. And in groups, they would need to rank them from strongest piece of evidence to weakest piece of evidence. The discrete skill here is evidence. I want kids to talk about evidence, and I want kids to understand that there is an interrelated connection between claims and evidence, and that it is impossible to talk about evidence by itself without talking about claim. And it's really hard to talk about claim without talking about evidence. And so let's do as kids would do. It's 3:33. Take a moment and rank these pieces of evidence from strongest at the top to weakest at the bottom. This practice will take 5 to 10 minutes. And so let's give you 3 minutes. And if you need more time, just let me know. Rank these pieces of evidence according to the claim from strongest to least strongest. It is 3:34. Let's come back at 3:37. Time check, 3:36. If you've had a chance to read evidence A, B, and C, if you could please drop in the chat, what's our strongest piece of evidence to support this claim? And what might be our least strong piece of evidence to support this claim? Thanks, Christina. B is definitely the strongest and C is the least strongest. Why do you think C is the least strongest, Christina? Let's start with that one.
Because it just gives a very blank, almost definition, and it doesn't go into details, and it could be related to anything, not necessarily this particular claim.
Absolutely. In fact, I actually Googled the definition of syncretic religions and just popped it in there. I did it because many times students, when they're writing, right, a lot of the times the samples that I put are based on the misunderstandings I'm seeing in kids writing. A lot of times kids think that a definition is evidence. And I want kids, again, think about the relationship between claims and evidence. A piece of evidence should support the claim. A fact, like you said, definition, right, is just a fact. It's important to know, but not necessarily a support of an argument or a claim. And so the B sample that you choose, about candomblé, was from an NPR article and radio show that my kids and I read and listened to. And so it's a piece of evidence that they've already seen before, and now they're just going to talk about it. It's purpose in writing, it's purpose in argumentation, and its connection back to the claim. A, it would be the second strongest, because while it connects to the topic of a syncretic religion and it talks about, having Andean characteristics in Andean understandings of Christianity, it doesn't say anything about being hidden or hiding from the Japanese, or the Spanish and the Portuguese. And so that's why B is the strongest. And so I have one last strategy to go over, and it's exactly what actually Kareth was talking about. Let's see who can create a paragraph, who can only give me 1 to 2 sentences. They're called 2-minute essays. And the point where I would do this probably right before setting kids off to independent practice, because I really just want to get them to step back, synthesize everything that they've kind of learned, and then give each other feedback, right? This is actually a motive for peer revision or peer feedback. And so students would write a 2-minute essay. I tell them not to worry about grammar, because that is, that's a revision thing that I can do later. And I have them write. I turn up music, and I just tell them, write like your hand's about to fall off. You have 2 minutes. And so let's go back to this original question. I got data from everybody when I first asked this question: why incorporate informal writing practice throughout instruction in the art of a sentence? Kids had to do 1 sentence. I've now finished my presentation. I finished my mini lesson. So I'm going to ask it again. I'm going to give them a second crack at this question and then see who has improved, right? Who do I still need to circulate to more? This is going to tell me, when kids go into independent practice, who do I need to circulate to first? Who do I need to clear up misunderstandings with? Is there a whole class misunderstanding that I need to clear up now before going into independent practice? So 2 minutes, why incorporate informal writing practice throughout instruction? Write as much as you want, or that you can in 2 minutes, and then go ahead and submit into the chat. You could also do this on a Padlet or any other like public forum or platform. It is 3:41. Let's come back at 3:43. All right, if you're done, you can go ahead and press enter. Thank you, Kareth. Practice, practice, practice. Allows evaluation of student writing. Actually, I'm gonna pull the chat over. Allows for evaluation of student writing, right? Allows different types of writing outside of English using claims. I also dropped in my response there. I wrote it in like a narrative form. Christina, right? This allows you to get students writing early on, helps you evaluate writing skills immediately. I like that idea about immediacy, and allows students a chance to look at claims and how they can defend them. And that's true if the claims is the focus skill that I'm working on, right? It might be evidence, it might be contextualization, it might be reasoning. I can use these strategies for all different types of writing skills, but the idea is, right, for both teachers and students, it's really useful. Just like Kareth and Christina said, this is getting us data, right, from kids, and for kids, it's about practice. And we know that the more they practice something, the better they get at it. No problem, Daisha. Thank you so much. So I'm actually going to pause right here. Thank you so much for being a great audience. And I'd really love to, like, just talk about what does writing instruction right now look like in your classrooms? Do you have any questions? And so I'm going to open the forum for all of you now. Karen.